So that was like, we finished filming in 2006, and then 2007, you know, was just announcing release dates, and then more delays, and then 2008 was the worst. They kept promising to put it out, and that 2008 was when word of them wanting to change the Dying Friend plotline leaked onto the internet, and people had seen like this other version that they were putting together in test screenings, and then that's when Star Wars fans all over the world started to get ticked off and started to email the Weinstein Company and threatened to boycott their other movies, and it got to the point where they were receiving hundreds of thousands of emails. And the emails weren't just going to Harvey Weinstein, they were going to everybody at the Weinstein Company and everybody who worked with them. So they got to the point where they couldn't even do business because they were getting bombarded with Star Wars fans. And they had a movie called Superhero Movie, which was like a parody of, it's like a scary movie, but it was based on, and all the Star Wars fans were like, we're gonna boycott this movie and it's not gonna make any money unless you like stop screwing around with Fanboys. And, you know, and they actually think that that like hurt the grosses of that movie, you know, so they started to take this seriously once they were just getting mail bombed and hundreds of thousands of emails. And the problem is they didn't understand that they had a Star Wars movie. They just thought they had a little comedy. They didn't understand that they had a Star Wars movie shot at Skywalker Ranch with the permission of Lucasfilm, and that Star Wars fans all over the world were really anxious to see this. I mean, I knew it, and Kyle knew it, because we had shown part of the movie at Celebration 4, I think, in Los Angeles, and everybody, it was just, that was, you know, we were so excited. And we thought, you know, clearly they would see now that we made a movie that appeals to the target audience, and the fans are going to love it. And even if just Star Wars fans go to see this movie, it's still going to be a success. But they thought that they could tinker with it and mess with it and make it, you know, this broad comedy that would appeal to everybody, which is never what the movie we were trying to make. We were trying to make a movie for us and for people who grew up loving Star Wars and who, you know, understand what it's like to love something that much, and, you know, to be all wrapped up in your childhood and be the mythology of your childhood. So, yeah, 2007 and 2008 was just horrible. Like, is our movie ever going to come out? Is it going to be recognizable as our movie once they finally release it? And, but it was the direct result of, like, you guys and Star Wars fans everywhere, like, you know, saying, we care about this, that made them finally change their mind. And even at that point, they were kind of, like, ticked off, because no one has ever, like, Harvey Weinstein has had battles with Martin Scorsese and won, you know, and like made changes to Martin Scorsese's movies that he didn't want because he's the producer. Like, this is the only time that I'm aware of in history that anyone has ever beaten Harvey Weinstein, you know, and told him how his movie, you know, one of his movies that he paid for, you know, should end. And so that's amazing. It's like a one at a time thing. And I think after that, like, Kyle ran into him once and he said, I'm not going to mess with comedies anymore. I just don't understand them. And, you know, I'm sorry the way that all worked out. But he, I think the thing that changed his mind is I heard that once Star Wars fans started photoshopping his head onto Darth Vader and calling him Darth Weinstein, and people on the street were saying, hey, Darth Weinstein, and he's like, oh my god, this little Star Wars movie has gotten, you know, gotten out of control. I heard that he went to China because he was going to shoot a movie in China, and that the ambassador of China showed up to greet him at the airport in a Stop Darth Weinstein t-shirt that somebody had given to him and told him that it said something else in English. And so he's here, welcome to China, Stop Darth Weinstein. He's like, I think at that point he's like, okay, I'm done messing with Fanboys. And I heard Dana Brunetti, one of the producers, told me that Harvey Weinstein called him up and said, all right, you guys can have your movie back and have whatever ending you want. Can we please turn off the internet now? So they said, sure, Harvey, we'll turn off the internet. And they let us have it back. And what the downside was they had kind of edited this whole new version of the movie and stuck a bunch of stuff in it that they had shot without Kyle or I's input. And Kyle had like 48 hours to go back into the editing suite and re-edit the movie and try to make it the way that it was before. And he wasn't, you know, he was able to restore a lot of it, but not. I think he still has a director's cut that he wants to do, and Fanboys has ended up being like one of the best-selling DVDs from the Weinstein Company. Big surprise. And now they've actually, you know, kind of come around 180 degrees and said, well, maybe we'll let you guys do, you know, this director's cut that you've always wanted to do, and it can be your version, and that could, you know, that could actually still happen. I think Kyle's still really optimistic, and we were Kyle and I are still celebrating that there was a scene like the guys in the van jumping to Lightspeed, that's on the Fanboys Blu-ray. Like, if you can imagine just me, it's one of those things I want to go back and tell myself, like when I was 13 years old, like this movie that you're right is going to end up being on the Star Wars you know, box set, like the definitive, like I still can't get over that. That's just like the inner Star Wars fanboy in me. Like that makes it all the stuff that we went through, that makes it all worth it. And just like, this is my first time being at a convention, a Star Wars convention, and like signing copies of Fanboys and like getting to hear people's reaction to it. And that's just like, it made all of it worth it. I know Kyle feels that way too. All the stuff that we went through and all the battles, like it made it all worth it that it finally got in front of the fans. You know, even though it was like not as big a theatrical release as we wanted, and it took people a while to find it, but now we feel like it's found its audience, and people that we always wanted to see it have seen it, and you know, and that made it all worth it. So I apologize for rambling nonstop for 30 minutes, but that's kind of like, that's the whole story from my perspective and how it all went down. I'm sure I've left some stuff out, but I would be happy to answer some questions from you guys if anybody has any questions. If not, then we can, you guys can, I have some DVDs that I brought that I'm happy to sign for you guys, and I have some, you may also not know this, I have a cameo in Fanboys. I play one of the Star Trek fans. You can see me, I'm in purple here, and my buddy Shappy is over here. He also plays one of the Star Trek fans. So we got to dress up this, and my idea was, I thought it would be hysterical if like the biggest Star Wars fan in the world was playing a Star Trek fan in this battle, and all these guys who play the Star Trek fans in Fanboys are actually 501st, like super hardcore, like, so that was, I remember Jay Baruchel, who plays Windows, like when we were shooting that scene, he's like, dude, this is supposed to, it's like, I can't keep a straight face in this scene, because you guys are all like, you're supposed to be these grim-faced Star Trek fans, and I know you're all the biggest Star Wars nerds in the world. So, but the funny thing about that, like my plan was, like they said, you know, you're the writer, you can do a cameo anywhere you want in the movie. I'll play a Star Trek fan because then I'll get to be in a scene with William Shatner. That will be awesome. And it was amazing. And my buddy Shappy is a big Star Trek fan, so I think he would get a kick out of that too. But the thing that I never planned was, like, one of the producers, Matt, came over. Do you want to meet him? I'm like, yes, this is my chance finally to meet William Shatner. And then as I'm walking over to meet him, I realized I am wearing a Star Trek outfit, and I'm going to go say hello to William Shatner now. And I went up, I'm like, you know, I'm one of the writers of this movie, and you know, I'm a huge fan, and he said, yes, I figured that out. Clearly, you're a huge fan. But it was, you know, he was still an amazing guy. We kind of spent most of that day that we were shooting at the casino just like stalking him and following him around. But, yeah, so would you guys, anybody have any questions? You, sir.
So, how did you end up getting the cast that you did? Because I know, like, at that time, quite a few of those people weren't really known all that well and have gone on to do really great things, like Seth Rogen and Jay Baruchel and Kristen Bell. Was this kind of thing where Weinstein had an idea of who they wanted, like a list of up-and-comers, or did you happen to know these people through someone else?
Kyle, like, oversaw a lot of the casting, and the script went out to, like, once Harvey Weinstein came on board, that it's like a legitimate studio movie, and then the script went out to everybody in town, and it was just kind of the actors who came in to read for it, and I knew that Sam Huntington, you know, did an amazing audition, and actually auditioned with Chris Marquette, and they had like great chemistry as friends, and I think that's how they got the part. Jay Baruchel was like already, he had like done a lot of amazing stuff. He had been on Undeclared, and we were all a big fan of Undeclared, and thought he would be perfect for it. And Kyle, the story that he tells me about casting Dan Fogler as Hutch was that they looked at a lot of people, and nobody jumped out at him, and then he just saw a picture of Dan Fogler, and just this picture of Dan, he's like, oh my god, this guy must be Hutch, clearly, and then he came in and was like perfect, and like totally owned the role. I just saw Dan Fogler at Comic-Con, and this makes me think of a Dan Fogler story, because I never do this, and I just found this out by talking to him at Comic-Con, that he grew up in New York, and he had never driven a car, and didn't even have his license, when he got cast to play Fanboys, and they said, like, we're going to have to drive this van a lot, and so it's like, crap, like, and he told them that he lied and said that he knew how to drive. He had never been behind the wheel of a car, so he went and had a buddy of his who knew how to drive. They rented a van, I think, from U-Haul, and he drove it around Manhattan and learned to drive on a U-Haul van in Manhattan like 2 days before he came to the set of Fanboys. So he said he was really nervous when he first got in the car with all of these actors, and none of them knew that he didn't know how to drive, and now he's going to take the van for a spin. But does anybody else have a question? Boom, that was the easiest Q&A ever. Yes, sir. novelist, I am a huge fiction fan, so there are a lot of writers like Heinlein and Bradbury and Douglas Adams and Neil Stephenson, those guys that I love. But as far as like filming, for me, for Fanboys, like the big inspiration for me was Kevin Smith. Like that guy, like clearly just a huge nerd, you know, and a guy with no connection to Hollywood whatsoever, who just had an idea for a movie, and like, I'm going to make a movie. Like nobody, I don't need permission from anybody. I'm just going to use, you know, this video store and this convenience store that I work at and try and make a movie. And he has, you know, built like a filmmaking empire out of that, and on a whole career out of just being a nerd, you know, and being a good writer and being a genuine guy. And so that was the weirdest, one of the other weirdest things, I mean, by like writing this script and trying to kind of emulate Kevin and do my own thing, that I ended up having Kevin Smith in my movie, you know, and Scott Mosier, who was his producer and the guy who edited Clerks, like on a, you know, a little Motorola machine in the back of the video store. Like that guy ended up working on editing Fanboys as well. So like these two guys who like inspired me to try to make a movie, like ended up working on my movie and being in my movie. It was, you know, the same with like, you know, being inspired by Star Wars and then getting to work with real Star Wars actors. Like it was, you know, it's like a unique, amazing thing. And I still, even when I talk about it, I'm like, I can't believe that happened. You know, I can't.